this is the sacrifice you have to pay to be able to be a part of this great mission of shlichus.
Right.
If I had to choose over again, I would never choose going into business right away over later on in life to give up those 12 amazing years.
Wow.
One of the best years of my life. Yes, it was hard.
Right.
But it was an incredible part of my life, and it was worth the sacrifice. And this is the price you pay.
Welcome to Homesick for Lubavitch, a podcast where we explore Lubavitch identity in the year 2024. My name is Bentzi, and I will be your host. Let's begin. Alrighty, I'm here with Rabbi Yossi Morozov. It's the morning after Pesach. Thank you very much for making the time. I got to know you a few months ago, I think. Maybe it's close to a year now. When it came time to look for an insurance policy, and somehow our paths crossed. But I think even then you told me, and subsequently I found out that you had a very different career just a few years earlier.
Correct, yes, yeah. Very different.
Very different, in a very different looking office, in a very different looking country. So why don't you talk a little bit about, that career, or maybe even introduce yourself, where you're from, and give a short background.
Yes, so my name is Yossi Morozov, and you know me. I was brought up in Brooklyn, Crown Heights. Got married to my wife, Suri. She's brought up also in Brooklyn in Borough Park all her life. And after we got married, we made the decision to move to Russia. I had a big passion for shlichus because I was brought up with that ideology. I was actually brought up seeing the Rebbe. I lived a few blocks away from 770. I saw the Rebbe many times. And actually had a great passion of trying to do kiruv, help other Jews. During my smicha, the type of smicha I got was more like being prepared to be a pulpit rabbi.
Mm.
But I knew even then that I want to go to some weird place that nobody else wants to go to.
When was this? Which year?
I was doing smicha in 2003 in Australia.
Okay.
I actually moved to Russia in 2006.
Okay.
It was about a year and a half or something after I got married. I had a baby.
In Russia?
No, we had a baby in New York.
Right.
And literally a few months later, we moved to Russia.
And when you say Russia, it's Russia.
I say Russia, I mean Russia. I mean, you have to take a plane to Moscow, and then you have to change airports, driving a few hours, and then from that airport, take a propeller plane, to a different city.
Mamish.
Yeah.
There's no direct flight from Moscow to the city you were in. From the Moscow Sheremetyevo airport.
At the time, no, there was no direct flight. I had to go to a different airport. So, take out all my suitcases, go to a different airport that only allowed you to take 20 kilo per person.
Huh.
So you had to bribe them or pay them or who knows what to try to get all your suitcases to the final destination.
What was the name of the city?
Ulyanovsk.
Ulyanovsk. So this is very east of Moscow.
It's southeast of Moscow.
Okay.
It's 1,000 kilometers southeast from Moscow.
Mm.
It's a city of 700,000 inhabitants.
Mm-hmm.
And the actual region is of 1.5 million people.
What's the region called?
It's called the region of Ulyanovsk.
I see. Oh, so this is a main city of the region.
Of the region, and yeah. And I would say in the city itself, there was probably, maybe 3,000 Jews.
That's it?
Yeah. And there's probably another 1,000 Jews in the region. Very assimilated. So, extremely assimilated. The average Jew is married to a non-Jew.
Assimilated because of communism, meaning generations back already.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How did you settle in that city?
So, I worked for Rabbi Lazar a few summers before I was married.
Okay.
And after I was married, he invited me to come to Russia. He gave me a list of cities. He said, please, we'll buy you a ticket, flight to any city. Choose a city. We would love to have somebody like you who is willing to move to any of these places. I had a few tickets booked for a number of cities. I checked out 3 communities, and this community had a core group of around 50 people that were very eager to have a rabbi.
Mm.
When I arrived there was at least 30 people waiting for us. A lot of them young university students.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So noticing that there's people that actually very badly want us.
Right. There's a core.
Yeah. I mean, my first Rosh Hashanah, which was only 10 days after I moved there, we had probably 160 people in total between the four minyanim,
Wow.
and all different ages. So, there was actually a group of people that really badly wanted this. And I think you said it right. They weren't really assimilated because they wanted to.
Right.
A lot of Russian Jews are deep inside them strong believers,
Right.
extremely strong believers. So, that was actually what I was looking for: people that want Judaism, and have no one else who wants to give it to them.
Right. Probably in this case because it's so far away.
Yeah, I mean, my wife went to the store and asked for Pampers. So they told her you have to go to the pharmacy.
Mm-hmm.
She walks into the pharmacy and she asked for a box of Pampers, and they asked her, do you want one Pamper or two Pampers?
Was it cloth diapers they were giving out?
The actual Pampers was not what people were really using at the time.
Right.
So you're talking about a place that was really backwards, and nobody wants to move to such a place.
Right. Well, how did you get your wife to agree to this?
I don't know. It's
I'm saying, was it she was
on
fully
board. I mean, yeah, it wasn't. It didn't have. There was no process to get her to agree with it. She was
Right.
like, yeah, she liked the idea, and she was like, yeah, let's go for it.
Huh.
So
So how long were you there in the end? In Ulyanovsk?
I was here for 12 years.
12 years.
The city progressed over time, became a little more modern.
Right.
Malls opened up, stores opened up very fast. You asked about my wife, actually. When I went to visit Russia the first time, I wasn't 100% sure I'm going to move there. It was obviously going to be up to if my wife wants it.
Right.
It was actually this city, Ulyanovsk, when she saw those youth yearning for a couple to come down, that she eagerly wanted to do this.
It sold it to her.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I was here for 12 years. It was really nice. It was tough. Russia's a very tough place to live. You have the government looking at you all the time. Every time guests came to visit me, they knew about it. They asked people who work for me or people around me, who are the guests, why they're there, how long will they be there.
So the KGB atmosphere is still there.
It's still there for foreigners. I don't know if locals feel it so much.
Right.
But people in high positions, like the director of every company there, government positions, or foreigners feel it a lot.
Right.
You have to register if you want to stay in any city more than 3 days.
Are they?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and I had one person who was on top of me. So I once made a joke.
What do you mean? You had a person in the
FSB, formerly known as the KGB, who was in charge of me. And it wasn't the same person every year, but every few years it rotated.
And they introduced themselves to you?
Yeah. So
they basically say like, "Hi, this is my name, and just by the way, I'm overseeing your activities here." So
yes, yeah.
You had to check in with them?
No.
Did they give you guidelines of what you are and not allowed to do?
No.
So basically, just making sure that you don't have any bad intentions.
Yeah. I have to be very careful of what I say.
Right.
But more so what I think. And I don't think
you were careful about what you think. How do they know what you think?
I was careful never to think bad about the Russian society, the Russian government, because if you think bad about, or your head starts veering into politics, you might end up saying something.
I see.
So I kept my mind in where it was supposed to be.
Right? Which was being with Karvidin.
Being with Karvidin, taking care of my family.
Right.
There's a few places my mind was supposed to be in, but politics wouldn't really help me anyways.
Wow.
It wouldn't change the world. It wouldn't change me. So,
if
I was bored, I'd maybe read American politics, which didn't really help me either.
That wouldn't bother them if you read American politics.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fascinating because it's a different dimension of sacrifice that you're talking about here, and from one hand, the person could say, okay, so you were engaging in self-censorship, and you were, this is a comment on Russian, on Russian paranoia and Russian stuff. Okay, maybe, but I think at least for this podcast's sake, the very interesting element to me is that, like, what do you give up for your shlichus? What are you ready to give up? And in this case, you had to give up. Whether one agrees with the politics of it or not, it's not democracy, it's not this, it's not that. Fair enough. But you had to give up a certain space of your mind, like you couldn't go there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I mean that's just a fascinating way of looking at shlichus in general. I mean, really, one could say perhaps any sacrifice or any commitment that a person makes, you are not just committing the action that you're doing, you're also committing your thinking to it, right? And the things that
Correct.
you cannot think in order to get to that thing, right? If you let's say are in business, there are some things that you can't really think about in order to do what you're doing. Maybe you can't necessarily think about your competitors.
Right.
Right? Of course, if you start cutting out more and more things, very quickly you can you can go into a place that's unethical,
Correct.
right? But I think whether it's business or anything really, a strong commitment, a total commitment, very often involves a at least a section of your thought being
Yeah.
cut off. In order for me to do this, I can't think that even the idea that if I do this, I can't spend time thinking about this other idea that I would have thought about otherwise, right? If I choose one career, that means that another career that I could have taken is off the table.
Right. Sometimes that happens. Yeah.
I'm saying that I just don't want it to sound like this is a shlichus thing.
Yeah.
But going back to shlichus, it's fascinating because in your case, there's a specific idea of like you couldn't think about Russian politics. And I think this will tie back to your story. There's also a lot of other things that you can't think about. That's not just about Russia. Like you cannot think about so much, at least your personal finances. Right? If you thought about that, would you choose this path of going on shlichus, right?
I guess probably. Yeah. I was probably quite idealistic. When I got married,
Right.
changing the world was very much on my mind. And I guess my personal finances was not the first thing on my mind.
Right. No, but I'm not
Yeah.
even talking about people that don't like. I'm not talking about full on like neglect their personal finances, but you're not thinking about getting rich. You're not thinking about
Yeah.
making a lot of money,
Yeah.
right? That's a thought process that you're taking out of the equation.
Right.
You're not thinking about a lot of comforts, being near family, for example, right? And I think as you go deeper and deeper, there are more and more things. You are in many, I mean, maybe we'll discuss it later on in the conversation, but
But I wasn't blocked from those thoughts. I mean, to say,
interesting,
money was on my mind.
right?
There's times I wanted to buy things and I needed the money for it, and money was on my mind. Seeing family was on my mind. I'd pick up the phone and say, "Hey,
Right,
maybe you guys should come for Yom Tov,"
right.
or maybe we'll meet you when I'm in America. So those things were on my mind. I just didn't have it maybe at reach.
Interesting.
Yeah,
So
I wouldn't say I blocked my mind.
you
From
didn't censor yourself in the
Yeah.
scenes. Do you think there's anything that a shliach does self-censor to be a shliach?
I think it's really personal. I think everyone's different.
Mm,
I think you could be a shliach and think about money all day.
right,
If it's up to your mind if you want to allow that,
right,
and it's okay. You could think about the fact that you're missing. I mean, to a certain extent, the fact that you don't have a restaurant to go to, for example. Let's put that right. I
right,
live in a place here. There's a lot of kosher where I am
right.
now. Obviously, it wouldn't be healthy and helpful to think all day. Which restaurant can I go to if the closest restaurant's a plane ride away.
Right.
But I don't know. I don't know if I think every shlich is different. Some shlichim might censor themselves just not to think about that. Some will think about it.
But what about on a deeper level? What about on a deeper level? Like, to me, shlichus is a very idealistic, very idealistic choice, right? A very idealistic way to live, and we are ultimately, for all the idealism that a person has, we have a very practical side, and one could even call it a self-centered, selfish side, however you want to categorize it or characterize it. And do you feel like you had to censor that out now that we'll get a little bit late. We'll get to where you are now, but clearly you're working in insurance now. Looking back, do you feel that practical side has to be censored.
I didn't feel that. No,
Mm.
I felt I could think about my needs, my family's needs. It was just might have been a little, a lot harder actually to get some of those needs,
Mm.
and some of those needs took years to get. But I eventually had most of the stuff that we really needed as a family.
Mm.
You know,
Right.
Start with, let's say, I'll give you an example. Chalav Yisrael.
Right.
It's a need, right? That some people want. Some people like, dairy
Right.
food. In the beginning, I didn't have that.
Right.
I went maybe a year and a half without eating dairy.
Yeah.
Eventually, figured out how to get long-lasting milk that lasts for a year, and we used to get 1,000 bottles at a time.
Mm.
Eventually, I figured out that every time I went to New York, I paid extra for overweight, and I took a suitcase full of chocolate and candy. At one point, I had someone run. It took me 10 years to get that, but on the 10th year that I lived in Russia, I had someone run me a Chalav Yisrael ice cream run from a city 25 hours drive away.
25 hours drive.
Yeah, and that this person sent me basically a truck full of ice cream, and we filled up 2 full freezers.
Huh.
And yeah, we had it was
25-hour drive of ice cream.
Yeah, but I did think about different. I obviously didn't think about ice cream the first few years that I was there. I couldn't afford thinking about that.
Right.
Right. I had, there's a community to take care of and build, but I did it. I did here and there stop and think. What would make my family's life a little bit easier here, a little more comfortable. I was allowed to think that, and I try to implement that.
Hmm.
I think it's important. I'm looking back. I think it was a good decision that I did that.
But what was the realistic? What about like the realistic side of shlichus in many ways is about bringing Mashiach.
Yeah.
Right, which is the ultimate idealistic enterprise.
Yeah.
Right, because it's a confrontation with reality itself. Like reality is going to change on the most fundamental level. Right. Like, do you feel like you had to, like in business, if reality gives you a patch in the face, you have to shift gears.
Yeah, of course.
You have to respect reality. And shlichus, in many ways, you're like, no, I'm going to push right through it. Do you feel that there's an element of censoring there, like where like I cannot think that way, I cannot think?
Yeah, there is, of course. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, you're going on shlichus. You're planning to, you're planning to really change the place where you are. You're planning to change families' lives, and there's a lot of blockades in the way.
Right.
First of all, people are not necessarily ready to make those changes you think you want them to make.
Right.
Right. And then there's practical things. You're a shliach and you want to open up a school. I wanted to open up a school for all the grades, realizing that people have very few kids in my community, and they live the city's an hour drive from all directions. Right. It's a huge city. Some stuff that I wanted to do, I just, it was really hard to get there.
Right. So you just block it out.
It's tough because you're in a shlichus, you're extremely idealistic.
Right.
See, if we're in business, you make a simple decision. This is not practical financially. Right. You're going to lose money doing this. You're not really going to succeed. Just change gears.
Right. Get back to it another day.
Yeah. Shlichus is very hard to change gears. You're really idealistic. Mm. I find friends shluchim sometimes who it's 10 years later, and sometimes I'm from the outside. I'm looking at with some of their goals, and they really should have changed gears 10 years ago. But it's hard. You're idealistic about it.
Right.
You want to do the right thing.
Right.
So it's very hard when you're shlichus just to shift gears. You usually will try to the last drop until you fall, and until you have to shift a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I gave you the example. I wanted to open up a school, and I realized I can't. But I did shift gears and opened up an after school and a preschool,
right,
and a Sunday school, and it was extremely successful.
Mm.
But in the back of my mind, I'm going to open up that full blown school one day. It took a lot of years to tell myself, you know what? Take this out of your head. Don't think about it again. It's not practical where you live to do this.
Right.
Right. It's very good to be idealistic, and thanks to that, you got a lot of things done. But it takes time to shift. I think it's much harder when you're that idealistic to really shift gears.
Right. What's that? Sound from outside. All right. Yeah, it's a fascinating topic. I mean, as I told you yesterday, I also spent a few years on shlichus. Not
Right.
quite, not quite, not at all in your circumstances. Although you're talking about Chal Yisrael milk is something I can relate to as a child growing up on shlichus in Hong Kong. Like we didn't have Chal Yisrael milk at any point in my life. Um, we didn't have Chal Yisrael milk or any real dairy or any dairy. And so in that sense, I can resonate with that. Although I don't think my parents would argue, and I certainly didn't feel that Hong Kong was anything close to the boondocks that you were describing, right? But but yeah, I mean, so I ask it not as a way to criticize shlichus. It's not my place to do that.
Right.
I'm not trying to critique it as an outsider. It's more. I think it's a very interesting thing to think about, and I think it's something that is part of the Lubavitch experience as a whole as well, which is when you buy into a vision that's so idealistic, and it's not even just shlichus. The whole idea of dir b'tachtonim,
Yeah.
the whole vision of chassidus from the beginning, in many ways demands a certain kind of. So I don't know if the word self-censorship, but it demands a certain kind of focus that seems to ignore some basic things, some basic facts and realities around you,
Correct.
right? And so the question becomes, do we sometimes find ourselves, or do we often find ourselves in a place where we are basically blocking off something that's right near us? We're blocking off a reality that's right next to us. And then the question becomes, if we are blocking that off, is that healthy, right? Because that reality can come bite us at some time.
Yeah. I think every shliach on a different level, but unfortunately that happens. Of course, I think many of us on shlichus end up blocking real realities.
Do you think there's a way around that? Looking back at it,
You know, I mean, the easiest way around it is when you have healthy family or healthy mashpiyim or healthy friends,
right?
which is sometimes a matter of luck and circumstances.
Mm.
Every human being is going to speak to people, including every shliach, whether it's a mashpia, a former Rosh Hashiva, a former good friend,
Right.
family member, a parent. So that's really the best way around it. Sometimes you have say a parent who has a good relationship with a child, and they tell them, you're in shlichus, we love it, but our grandchild has a real health issue.
Right.
Let's really analyze that.
Right.
And if you don't have a very healthy, down to earth social surroundings that respect and understand shlichus well and want shlichus, but also understand the practical part, it's very hard to on your own sometimes get out of it if you're really idealistic. If you're a true shliach and you're really doing it for the real reasons, which is usually the case,
Right.
and you're willing to sacrifice. I think every shliach is a sacrifice, whether it's Hong Kong or Russia or even somewhere in New Jersey.
Right.
There's a strong element of sacrifice when you leave the from community and you don't have a lot of the amenities we have here. And with that mindset, you end up blocking things.
I think the sacrifice is primarily in the mind.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so fascinated. I wasn't even planning on talking to you about this,
Yeah.
but that's, in many ways, to me, that's the biggest sacrifice. Like, even if you live, let's say, in a suburb that's near Monsey, let's say,
Yeah.
there are suburbs in New Jersey that are near Monsey.
Yeah.
There are shluchim in Monsey itself. I mean, it's not necessary. Obviously, there are different sacrifices that come with being further away and without having that access. But in many ways, to me, the sacrifice is the mental one, which is basically blocking out certain options. Blocking out possibilities and saying that those possibilities are not available to me.
Correct.
Right. Right. And being like shlichus is what I'm doing regardless of other opportunities.
Yeah.
That's a sacrifice. That's a massive sacrifice. And in many ways, that could be the largest sacrifice, because ultimately your head is the most powerful thing you have, right? And it's it's how you see the whole world, right?
Yeah.
If you had to choose between not having a certain food or having part of your head taken away from, part of your mind taken away from you, or off limits to you. I think everybody would choose, I'll survive without pizza, but let me think,
Yeah, yeah,
let me,
of
right?
course, 100%,
So I
yes.
think that's in many ways the bigger sacrifice. So, but before I mean, we should have probably clarified this earlier, but describe a little bit why you're no longer on shlichus. I don't want people to feel like you just picked up one day and left.
Right. So, I'll just say 2 words about the sacrifice. It was extremely hard the first years. A month after moving to Russia, they made a new law that foreigners have to leave every 3 months and get a new visa.
Mm.
And if you're working in a specific city, you would have to get an invitation from the local immigration department sent to the host country you come from, which takes 2 weeks, and only afterwards get a visa. So which means essentially every 10, 11 weeks for 4 years straight, my family had to go to the U.S., from the U.S., ask for an invitation. So this was like almost a 3-week process till we can get back to Russia.
Every few months?
We had to do this every 11 weeks, yeah.
Every 11 weeks you'd go back to the US for 3 weeks and then come back?
Yeah.
And do the whole 20-hour drive and...
Yeah. And there's different time zones. So you're talking about, on the watch, it was 30 hours later when we came home.
Oh, I know what it is to fly across the world.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is to drive in some beaten up Russian bus all those hours.
And
but
the roads, you're talking about highways there. Not my area. It was usually, one car goes this way, one is that way. And that's the big highway between city to city.
Right.
Which, you're driving your small car that barely drives, and a truck is ahead of you. And the roads are bumpy.
Scary.
Yeah, it was you're knocked out for a few days after each ride. We didn't have much money at the time, so this was an expensive endeavor. You're coming to America, and you're paying a lot of money to make those invitations and visas and tickets, and everything was, they make sure to charge nicely, the Russians. It was heavy. We wanted to get Russian residency, and someone in the immigration department at the time would not allow it, till I had to speak to the governor of the region, whose last name was the same last name as me. He was not Jewish, but his last name was Morozov. And he sorted out. Eventually, he's like, I'm going to mix in over here and make sure you get your Russian residency. And we got Russian residency, which means we had like a green card.
Right.
We had a similar to Russian passport. We didn't have to do all this. This is just one of many, many obstacles. I mean,
right.
We sent a container of our possessions, and they locked it up for over 6 months and didn't allow us to access our essentials and all our stuff that we had, our clothes and everything we had in there. We just moved down. So
did you know all of this before you committed to living there? Did you know that they were going to be so suspicious of a foreigner?
No, I was in Russia many times, running camps. The Russian people are nice people. I really think so. I mean, I'm not talking about the Jewish people. The Russian people in general have a very nice mentality, and they're good people.
Right.
And when you meet even authorities, whether it's the police or the Russian government, they're nice people a lot of times. The government in my city was very nice to me. I didn't realize that the deep state, if you want to call it, there's a deep state in Russia that's behind all this, that runs the government too.
Right.
The governor, the mayor, in a way, they have a lot of limitations.
Right.
And I didn't realize that deep state that exists in Russia, that runs things behind the scenes.
Right.
And it was really tough. And that I'm calling it deep state. I don't know a different word, but these are the people, after
the bureaucracy, the intelligence.
Yeah, there's like two governments in Russia. There's like the government running the technical part,
right.
And then there's like, the unelected part,
right.
Or whatever you want to call it, of the Secret Service,
right.
And they have an unlimited amount of authority over the government and everyone. And they do a lot of things behind the scene.
Right.
The immigration department is under them.
Right.
So there's a lot of moving parts in the country that they control, independently of the local governments.
Right.
After being there for 11 years, and, life was tough in the beginning, but I have to say, eventually my kids, my wife, and myself, we made friends. People that in our community, our connection with them was not just trying to bring them to Yiddishkeit. They were becoming closer. We have numerous families that moved to Eretz Yisrael and are from today. I would say there's at least 100 and something local families that are keeping Pesach and many parts of Judaism on a regular basis, thanks to us. We gave classes daily. We had a very active community, but I actually had people that over time, I consider them my friends and they consider me friends. And life became easier and easier. We actually became used to living there.
Right. Comes home.
I was thinking in Russian. I remember walking to shul back and forth, and I wasn't thinking in English anymore. I was thinking in Russian. Sometimes for, just to chat about any topic, I can call a local person. And I really started liking the place. I also had a lot of government connections at times. So when obstacles came along, I picked up the phone, the mayor, the governor. The mayor used to sometimes call me and ask me Kabbalistic questions. He was a Christian, but he had a very, very good,
Right.
I used to walk in
Russian Orthodox.
Yeah, yeah. I was friendly with a lot of the clergy in the city, including the head mufti, the head priest. I used to walk in the streets with my yarmulke day and night comfortably. Jews and non-Jews alike would say hello to me. People knew me. I was very well known in the city.
Right.
And out of the blue, on the 9th of May, which is Russia's biggest holiday of the year, it's called Russian Victory Day.
Against the Nazis.
Yeah.
Right.
I open up my mailbox and I see a letter from the FSB, the Secret Service, that I have 14 days to pack up and leave.
Out of the blue. You didn't see this coming at all.
Out of the blue.
Huh.
Actually, that same, the irony, on that same day, I was invited to stand on the stage with the governor, mayor, and city officials in front of tens of thousands of people by the parade. They wanted me to be in the stage. They wanted the face of one of the rabbi and other dignitaries on the stage. So it was like I really wasn't expecting that. I thought I didn't really take it serious the first 24 hours, to be honest. It was like something was weird. I didn't really believe it.
Right.
I called the next day the mayor and other governor officials, and I said, I want to speak to you. And I walked over to their office. They were like, sure, we're going to help you. And when they saw that letter, their face, turned, different colors. They realized they can't really help me.
Right, it's out of their hands.
It's out of their hands. They gave me some advice how to go to court. It was very hard for me because my whole life I wanted to do one thing and one thing only, shlichus.
Right.
So this was really, really, really hard for me, and I fought for this place. There was every obstacle you can think about. Every class I started, I expected 20 people to show up, and one showed up.
Right.
And it took years till I had those 20 people.
Right.
Nothing within my community was easy to do.
Right.
Everything I cherished and I was happy about. And this was a lot. I fought to get myself a visa in this place,
Right.
And in the beginning, my mind was a little bit paralyzed. Like I didn't know what I'm going to do. I decided I'm staying here. I'm not going anywhere.
Right.
It sunk in like probably 48 hours later that I'm going to have to do something if I want to stay here.
Right.
I took my case to court and lost.
How long did that take?
The court case, well, there's 3 court cases. The local court took around 2 months. The judge was almost crying when he ruled.
Like, what's the case? What's the argument?
Well, the argument of the FSB is that I'm involved in terrorist activities and I'm a danger to the region.
And they had proof?
And they have proof, but they can't show the proof to anyone, not me and not the judge.
It's confidential, right?
It's confidential because it's dangerous. Yeah. The judge, I realized in the court, wow, this is amazing. The judge feels bad he has to rule against me. He was like almost crying.
Huh.
The lawyer for the FSB actually was crying, and she went to hug my wife and apologize.
Huh.
So the judge afterwards gave me instructions how to go to the higher courts. So I went to the higher court. It's called the regional court, and I lost again.
Also a few months.
Yeah, 2 months to process again. I guess these judges had a certain sense of a tiny sense of morality, and that's why they were like pushing me to the next court up.
Right.
The final one, they pushed me to the Supreme Court of Russia.
Okay.
Right. A part of me at that point, I was getting a little bit realistic of what's going on.
Right.
And I had to start thinking, you know what? There is a tiny chance a miracle will happen and I'll win this Supreme Court case and I'll stay in shlichus. But what if not? So as the court case was going on in the Supreme Court, the paperwork and getting ready for the final date of the actual trials.
So this is in Moscow, the Supreme Court?
Yeah, Supreme Court of Moscow, which is very rare that they accept a case with a foreigner involved.
Mm-hmm.
My mind already, at some point I said to my wife, I said, listen, our mind has to go somewhere else now. let's be practical.
Did you ever speak to the FSB guy in your town, the one that you had met earlier?
During this period, they would not want to meet me, so I had people in my community meet them.
And
They claim this was for the best. They're doing this for the best of the community. They're trying to help the community. So, at one point, the president of the community went to meet the FSB office, the main office in the city. A building, 5-floor building. I don't know how many workers they have there. They're busy. This is this FSB.
Right.
And when he walks in, there was 5 people in the room, and one of them says, "Oh, it was very nice that your wife was in Amsterdam last week." The second one opens their mouth and says, "Your daughter did very well in her test today."
They're trying to intimidate you?
Intimidate him. And
they were talking to him about his wife.
Yeah, his wife, his kids, each, and
wow.
they actually.
So they monitor everybody.
Yeah, the president of my community came out. I was sitting in the car waiting. When he came out, he was shaking. He's like, "Rabbi, could you take me to the airport? I want to go to Israel right now."
With his family.
Yeah, and he calmed down that day, but it was like he realized that their eyes are on him from every angle.
Because he's a president of the community.
Yeah. So, I got a nice letter 4 months into this whole thing from the FSB that they apologize, how good I am as a rabbi. They went through all the classes that I do. You do Hasidus on Tuesday, you do Gemara on Wednesday. They were going through what my wife does in the preschool, what's going on there. They actually really knew well. And it was a very nice letter praising all the work we do.
Right.
And I was like, wow, maybe I should save this for my funeral. This is a good one. I'm saying this is
a beautiful duch.
Yeah. And then, but by the end of but they finished the letter on the second page. Unfortunately, because your acts of terrorist activities within the city and within the region, you're a danger to the country. So we have to impose Article 15 something, and you'll have to leave.
I mean, I have to tell you, it's the first time I'm talking to a terrorist. But...
Oh, okay. Congratulations. There's a first for everything, no?
Yes, thank you. So you had this conversation with your wife. You said,
yeah. Do we go on shlichus again? Somewhere else, or do we settle in a from community?
Right.
That was a tough one. There's a part of me that was brought up with this, Chabad upbringing that a shliach is there forever.
Right.
And you don't drop it.
Right.
So once a shliach, always a shliach.
Right.
You're a shliach in Hong Kong as a child. I'm sure you heard that phrase, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Once a shliach, always a shliach. On the other hand, I'm trying to be practical here. You know what? My kids are getting older. My oldest is already 12.
Right.
Let's be practical here. Chinuch wasn't easy for us. It was probably the biggest struggle. It was probably the only thing that still reminded me I was in shlichus. It was that
right.
I'm out of a from community. And there's other aspects. There's also the psychological aspect. Can I handle starting over from scratch emotionally?
Right.
I was afraid if I went to a new place, I might be thinking about, regretting the fact that I had a beautiful setup community and had to start over from scratch.
Right.
I didn't feel that was a healthy lifestyle.
To constantly chase what you had there somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right.
It was very torn, but my ultimate decision was no. I didn't feel that for my personal emotional situation, or for my kids' educational situation, that would be best to go on shlichus.
Mm.
There's different stages in a person's life. I'm going now. What I told myself then was, let's face reality. I'm a family at this point with 6 children, and when I'm moving somewhere, my ideology cannot be the only part of it. There's 6 children here. I don't know if I was obligated to think when I got married how my children will look and what health conditions they will be in and which type of therapy they might need. I think I did the right thing to let my ideology let me go on shlichus, and I would stay there forever if I can.
Right.
But if I have to start over, let's look at the table right now. What's going on over here?
Right.
Clearly, some of my kids belong in a smaller class, but a real school, not being homeschooled. It was pretty black and white. What the right thing would probably be for my family.
Right.
Like what would be the best thing? I don't know. The right thing is the right thing to say, but the best thing for my family. And I decided, at some point, I decided if I don't win this court case, I'm moving back to the United States. That's the country I know.
Right.
That's where my family and friends are.
Right.
And I'm going to move into a frum community. What I'll do, I had no clue.
Right.
But that was the decision I made then.
Right.
Not an easy decision because you're both a Chabad. You don't understand what's going on probably in my brain.
Yeah, everybody listening to this also pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up on shlichus, so I definitely understand what
Yeah.
you're talking about. I mean, but it does sound a little bit like we were talking earlier, that in many ways, things that you had blocked or kept out of mind while you're on shlichus, suddenly when that shlichus comes to an end against your will,
Yeah.
but that choice that you had made to go on shlichus to this
Yeah.
town, which then kept certain considerations off the table, that choice was now back. Now you had another choice, and all those considerations came back on the table.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, I mean, a shliach once told me, he was, when I spoke to him, he was already he already had many of his children back on shlichus. Like, so he had been on shlichus probably for 50 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and he told me, and he was still on shlichus when I spoke to him, and he told me, and this wasn't on the podcast. This was somebody else that I had met, and he told me, look, in many ways, the beauty of shlichus is that you make a choice once when you're very young.
Yeah.
And that's the last time you make that kind of choice. It's for the rest of your life. You don't have to constantly, right? Which is what we were talking about earlier. You make a choice and you take things off the table. Never to be reconsidered again.
Yeah.
Right? But then against your will, in this case, you are now being forced to reconsider it. Right? And I think, I think that's just just another kind of reminder about the sacrifice of shlichus, the kind of things that the mind basically has to shut off.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And so you ended up we're sitting in your office now. You ended up deciding to go into life insurance.
Yeah.
But we were talking in shul. We were talking in shul about it. I'm trying to remember exactly how we were, because it was a very interesting conversation at the time. Just to explain, Yossi lives in Pomona, and I'm here with family just for Yom Tif. So we don't live in the same community, but we spent some time over Yom Tif in shul.
Now, what intrigued really the conversation in shul is looking at your father,
right?
And I see someone in a similar situation like me. I know it sounds strange,
right?
Different parts of the world, different generations, and all that, but when I was going through this, I was actually thinking to myself, very soon my oldest child will become bar mitzvah.
Right.
I will be forced to send him across the globe for him never to come home again.
Right.
He's not. Yeah. And
that's me.
Yeah, and I mentioned that to your father, and he said that's exactly what happened to you and all my kids.
Yeah.
We lived in Hong Kong, and we had to send them abroad, never to come home again.
Right.
I mean, I remember thinking about it. Will my child even want to come home for Yom Tif? Right. He's going to be torn about wanting to see his parents and wanting to have the fun of wherever he is,
right?
Experiencing, normal from life,
right?
And it's going to happen very fast. The next child, before you know it, in a few years from now, 3 out of our 6 kids are out of the house, and then eventually all of them, and they're not coming back. I do not see how my children are coming back to this crazy place to live.
Right.
So it's like forever. Now, of course, we'll try to make it work. We'll go visit them. They'll hopefully come visit us.
Right.
But it was also reality when I was thinking about a new shlichus. And I came over to your father and I asked him if he ever thought about, if it ever went into his mind. And I didn't get a clear answer, but I understand at some point it did go through your father's mind that this is a really tough part of shlichus where your kids leave. And, one day you come home, you're in Hong Kong and there's no kids home.
Yeah.
And they're in all different parts of the world. And it's,
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't want to talk for my father. I do intend to have him on the podcast one day when it works out for him. Look, I don't know that I'm the one to have that conversation with him anyway. It's a very raw conversation.
Right.
I don't know if I mentioned it on the podcast already, but I certainly didn't mention it to you. this same shliach that I told you about,
Right.
who spoke of shlichus in the most beautiful way I'd ever
Yeah.
seen, and I felt that he meant it.
Yeah.
I also intend to have him on the podcast, but until I do, I don't want to say I don't want to say his name. And he interestingly, when he was choosing to go on shlichus, he had options. Like his father was a very well off man with a business, and he wanted him. He was the oldest. He wanted him to come back. And some of his friends, also Lubavitch Bachrim at the time, had gone back to their father's business.
Right.
And he chose to go on shlichus. It was a real choice for him.
Right.
And 50 years later, he spoke about it with such love and such just love and positivity.
Yeah.
Like it was such a beautiful way of articulating it. But I also know, I don't know if he told me, but one of his kids told me that that them going away as young children for chinuch was the hardest thing for their parents.
Right.
And that their mother would never, whenever they brought it up in conversation, she would shut down the conversation and leave the room. She couldn't.
Yeah.
Years later, she couldn't handle talking about it.
Right.
So I don't think this is what this podcast is about.
Right.
But what you're talking about, to me at least, is this is not a conversation about like, is it worth it? The cost of shlichus and chinuch and things like that.
Right.
It's a valuable conversation.
Right.
But in many ways, you didn't even get to that.
Right.
Your hand was forced, and you didn't have to deal with that. You were thinking about it. To me, what's fascinating about the conversation is the contrast of the things that the FSB basically forced out of your mind.
Yeah.
In a much more a legal way. Like if you think about this, you're going to be in legal trouble. And the things that we take out of our mind, or shluchim take out of their mind,
right.
In order to facilitate shlichus, right? There are considerations that are taken out that are taken out. Like you said, you weren't sure if my father thought about it or not. Of course, he thought about it, but he also didn't think about it.
Right.
Right. Because you cannot think about it head on.
Right.
If you do, you're going to be in trouble from a different side. Right.
Right.
So
I think it's probably healthy for certain shluchim not to give too much thought to certain topics that just you can't really do anything about it.
Right.
The institution of shlichus is an incredible one.
Right.
And it's a noble one, and I think it's the institution that will bring Mashiach.
Right.
Right. I really hope that very many young people are going to be idealistic about going to shlichus into every possible place, every type of shlichus possible. And there's going to be sacrifice with that.
Right.
But ultimately, I think there has to be a balance with, I think in my situation, I was allowed to think, and I think it would have been pretty much a crime if I wouldn't think.
Right.
The thought process, what are you going to do when your children are out of the house, is not necessarily something a 22-year-old has to think.
Right.
But I would say to any shliach in my situation, I had some friends that were telling me, you're so passionate about shlichus and you enjoy it that you're not going to enjoy anything else. Just here's an option for you. Try out this place. Try out that place. And I had to force myself to actually not think about that. I mean, not think about it, but like.
Interesting. So now it's the reverse.
I had to start saying, let's be objective over here.
Right.
I'm in a different stage in life, and let's be realistic. I come to a new place.
Right.
I'm going to work very hard to establish it. And 5 years into it, 3 out of my 6 kids are out of the house.
Right.
And there's going to be emotional feelings involved, which I'm sure every shliach to a certain extent has.
For sure.
Is it the right thing? Is it the best thing? Right or wrong is also objective, meaning to say it would have been the right thing.
Right.
But I thought then it was very important to have a few options on the table and consider them equally.
Right.
Idealism cannot be in the way sometimes of practicality.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think ultimately there's no need for you to defend your decision.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are other private considerations that you're not even talking about because they're private, right?
Right.
And that's ultimately this is not a place for you to defend yourself. There's no need for that.
Right.
Um, I think what was interesting to me from the conversation in shul was, I think I asked you if you have any bitterness.
No bitterness at all. No.
Right. And you told me something which was very interesting, which was, look, I know that if I'd started my life insurance business or any other business when I was younger and with less expenses, and in my 20s, I'd be coasting now, or I could have been coasting. There's no guarantees in anything,
Right.
but I could have been coasting, and because I came to business much later, I have to hustle, right?
Right.
You said that, but nevertheless, I look back. Talk about that a little bit.
I came into life insurance the same time as I started. There's a few other young Hasidim that started, got the license with me, and we speak to each other all the time.
Right.
Some of them live in Williamsburg, some of them Muncie. The question I got many times is, Yossi, I mean, you're killing it. None of us just, within 1 year, you already have one employee. 2 years later, you have an office. 3 years later, another employee. And it seems like you're doing well. You're selling a lot of insurance. Don't you regret that you didn't start this when you were 20?
You'd be king.
You'd be king now. You realize that,
Right.
know. And it's hard to not hear that question, because you come in, it's tuition for 6 kids. I had to have a house. I couldn't live in an apartment anymore. There's a certain lifestyle you're used to. You need have a large family, and in a way, in any business, to start when you're young and have very few expenses, and and then you turn 40 years old, and there's money, there's money sitting in the bank, and there's money spilling everywhere, and whatever the dreams a person might have.
When it comes to money, there's no question
Yeah.
that getting a head start when you're younger is a better idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't ignore the question every time I got it. But my answer to that is to myself. I don't have to, answer anyone. But for me, the way I really look at it is like, you know what? It was worth. This is the sacrifice you have to pay to be able to be a part of this great mission of shlichus.
Right.
I would never, if I had to choose over again, I would never choose going into business right away over later on in life, to give up those 12 amazing years.
Wow.
One of the best years of my life. Yes, it was hard.
Right.
But it was an incredible part of my life, and it was worth the sacrifice. And this is the price you pay.
The price you pay.
Yeah.
Right? That's what you're saying. I mean, it's a beautiful sentiment.
Yeah. So there's zero bitterness of starting late, because I got something 100 times more than that.
Wow.
There was zero bitterness leaving shlichus, because, to be honest, but eventually I was arrested. Actually, I didn't manage to leave. I lost the Supreme Court, and I was not ready to leave. I had to train local people to take over the community. I didn't feel like just dropping it. It was very hard to find a new shliach. It took only a few months ago someone moved there. For 5 years straight, there was local people running the community successfully. And I wasn't ready to leave. And at some point, they actually arrested me and put me on a plane and sent me to America. I have to say...
Your family was already in America?
No. My family had to stay there a little longer. My wife had to finish selling the house, close,
So they didn't arrest... Oh, they were never accused. They were never accused.
Only I was a terrorist. But
this is a very chauvinist FSB you're talking about here.
No. My wife was clearly told she's going to have to leave, and she's going to lose all her rights. And
Okay.
But they didn't arrest her, and she was nervous about it. But practically, we had to close shop. And
it seems to be fair that they weren't out to get you; they just wanted you out.
Yeah,
they weren't out to put you in jail.
No,
they were out to just get you out for whatever reason.
They really hate foreigners.
Right. I mean, that's all. I mean, you just have to be honest. It wasn't like anti-Semitism. We're going to hurt these people. It was just like, get you out of here.
It was really foreigners. At the same time that they were trying to kick me out, the local government gave our shul a used piece of land to build a new building. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is anti-Semitism, but I'm watching. I was there. The local Islamic community lost every clergy they had much earlier than us.
Because who are
foreign. They banned almost every American religion in Russia. They only allow 1 or 2 forms of Christianity today in Russia.
Right.
Almost every humanitarian aid organization in Moscow was banned. The American embassy, had to take back 750 workers because they were foreign.
Look, Lubavitch paranoia comes from somewhere.
Yeah.
It comes from somewhere.
I mean, I think a system that's trying to get rid of every foreigner will eventually get rid of some rabbis too.
Right.
That's what I felt. They were not. They were not even mean to me. Even on the plane, as they were arresting me, they were trying to be nice to me.
Right.
Do you need anything? Do you need water or this?
Right.
They were not trying to be mean to me or to my community. So I don't know what's really behind this. It's hard for me to understand.
It sounds like you do. It sounds like you have an idea. Foreigners.
Yeah. It's still hard for me to understand that also. Ultimately, I was there helping local people. 15 people had a job thanks to me. People were getting food and clothes thanks to me. People had religion, which is a very good thing, thanks to me.
Paranoia is a very strong thing.
I hear. Yeah, I guess,
I mean, Lubavitchers know what paranoia is.
Yeah, so I guess there's a certain paranoia there, in the culture. So.
Yeah.
On the plane, I was happy. I was actually very happy. I wasn't sad, I looked back, I was like, wow, I'm going to go to the Rebbe and say thank you for the 12 years of shlichus. I was not bitter about being, and there was what to be bitter about, because I just built a house. I lived in an apartment. I just finished building a house, and I can go on and on from personal level or for community level.
You were just seeing the fruits of your success.
Yeah, just saying it. Yeah, I could go through each program in my community and say like how it finally started.
Right.
Working out, like finally the minyan could work even without me, showing up exactly on time. Finally the shiurim are working out. If I'm not there, someone else starts giving the class.
Right.
Every single program was like that. But you know what? On the plane, I was actually happy. I thought it was a beautiful opportunity to be on shlichus, and I succeeded to my mission. And now it's we say in Pirkei Avos, Lo yalecha malacha ligmar.
Right.
Not everything is mine shop to finish.
Right.
I'll still support the community from as much as I can from here. And there's no bitterness of.
So now you're a donor to your community?
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right.
But, it was in a way, it was a nice opportunity to be in shlichus, and I think it's a nice opportunity for my family to have also this lifestyle. It was a little scary. I'm not going to say it wasn't. I had no clue on the plane what I'm doing next. I didn't know I'm doing life insurance.
Right.
I had no clue.
Right. Look, okay. I mean, I think in many ways that's a podcast more like for an entrepreneurial podcast of like how you figured it out at that age. I definitely personally have interest in it, but I don't think it's like for this conversation. What I'm more interested in is the Lubavitch identity aspect, because we were talking earlier before we started that to me in many ways, I mean, this podcast is obviously about Lubavitch identity, but to me the crux of the question. Or where the question becomes more obvious is when you're not on shlichus, because when you're on shlichus, it's pretty straightforward. What does it mean to be a Lubavitcher? It means to be on shlichus and to be mamale and to fulfill the demands of shlichus, and that more or less is at least a general idea is there, right? Exactly how each shliach goes about it is maybe a different question, but the general idea is there. And hasn't really changed, because until Mashiach comes, the definition is there. But when you're not on shlichus, what does it mean to be a Lubavitcher? There the question becomes, what does it mean to be a Lubavitcher today, right? That becomes more of a question, it seems.
Yeah.
And so, you're talking about that flight, which it sounds, is very dramatic. Like you basically been forced out of. Bal karchach, you've been forced out of your role and out of your life path, your life path essentially, and you are now looking at the future. You have to think about how you're going to support your family, right? The life insurance, but you probably also have to think about, okay, what does it mean? Like, where does this leave me as a Lubavitcher?
Yeah, that question was in my mind, at least for the first 2-3 years. It was in my mind the whole time.
So
it was very complex.
Right. So describe that a little bit.
Very complex. A part of me, I can't say I felt totally comfortable not being on shlichus. A part of me felt that there's something missing. I'm not giving.
Right. And
I'm living in a place where there isn't much to give. There's like every chesed organization.
It's too easy.
It was a very big question, and I don't have the answer in one word to your question, but the way I could say from my perspective, I think as Hasidim we have to be ready for everything.
Right.
From a shlichus aspect is just because someone's not on shlichus, if you have a neighbor 5 houses down that might not have matzah, go over to them.
Right.
You have someone 10 houses away that might not hear shofar. It might be hard to try to juggle family, shul, and everything else on your Rosh Hashanah. Let's find that time and go blow shofar. You have someone that wants to learn Chassidus with you, and I've had that numerous times here. If you have the time, don't sacrifice your family, obviously, for this, but if you could, make a share with them. That's from a more outreach aspect. But then there's a personal aspect, Hasidism didn't come to uproot Judaism. It came to enhance Judaism.
Right.
The basic tenets of Judaism are always there. Hashem created the world with, we wake up and we're supposed to provide for our families. He wants it to be that way. That was a natural way things should be.
Right.
People learning Torah their whole life, or going on shlichus their whole life, is a beautiful thing and an added bonus if some individuals can do that. But Hashem created the world that your typical Yid is going to wake up and work. He wants you to be working for your parnasa. He doesn't want to give you bread for free.
Right.
He wants you to take care of your kids, daven with a minyan, learn Gemara, or whatever topic of Torah that you enjoy learning. And with it, Shulchan Aruch pretty much has our lifestyle, 90% of the day already cut out for us. Right. So whether you're a chassid or not, these things should be done.
Right.
And they're not easy, but every person could strive to do that. The point of Chassidus is a little bit like the cream on top of the cake.
Right.
Like, you learned Gemara that day, but now you have opportunity to be Mekusher to the Rebbe and do Chitas Rambam. Now you have the opportunity to learn Chassidus. I think a Chassid today is trying to be Mekusher to the Rebbe, whether it's going to the Ayil, learning his Chassidus, or doing his takanos, whatever that takana was,
Right.
He's speaking about go to talucha, whatever it is. It was yesterday, right?
Do you feel do you feel less of a Lubavitcher today than you did on shlichus?
No, not 1 ounce less. No. Did I have a time that I had those complex thoughts? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. In the beginning, I felt like like a real Lubavitcher, I should be doing more of this and more of that and more, and I'm saying, Hashem gave every person a certain amount of koyach.
Right.
Right. I'm saying, if He wanted every person, He gave the koyach for each person to do what they could do. If He wanted us to do more, He would give the person more koyach.
Right.
You could have made the world 28 hours in the day instead of 24, but there's a certain amount of hours in the day.
Right.
And
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm like, what I hear from your story, and I feel like the lesson I get from your story is, up to Gimel Tammuz, even in the late 80s, most Lubavitchers were not on shlichus. Most Lubavitchers were not on shlichus, and it was only in the mid 80s that really a sizable group of people even went on shlichus.
Correct.
Right. So the idea that the only way to be a Lubavitcher is to be on shlichus is a recent thing, even in Der Shvi, let alone in the earlier Ders.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. And why it happened that shlichus became so dominant, is a different discussion probably. I would guess that the main reason is that, especially after Gimel Tammuz, it was much easier to understand yourself as a Lubavitcher and what it means to be a Lubavitcher on shlichus than not on shlichus.
1,000%.
I think that's for sure a large factor, right? And what that does, I think it's in many ways generates an immense amount of good, because a lot of people go on shlichus and they do a lot of great things on shlichus. But what it does also is it creates a status quo of, to be a Lubavitcher is to be on shlichus. Like, but if someone is asking themselves, what should I do with my life? Automatically shlichus, right? And on one hand, that creates a very powerful force because it becomes the norm, right? But what it also does is it takes away the choice, and it takes away the realization that, you know, there there there's a choice to go on shlichus. There's also a choice to not go on shlichus, and you have to assume the burden of your choice one way or another, right?
Correct. I agree with you.
There's a way to there's a so when it's a norm and you see it as a norm. So if you go, okay, you're doing what you're being normal, you're doing what you're supposed to do, and if you don't, you're being abnormal, right? You're not doing what you're supposed to do, right?
Right.
But what you're describing to me is shlichus was a choice in the beginning, and it was clear to you that because it was a norm as well, it was clear to you that this was the right thing to do,
Correct.
and so you could put yourself fully into it.
Right.
When you were forced out of it, it became clear to you, one way or another, that
Yeah.
you had to choose a different path. And right, and because
Right.
of that clarity,
Right.
you were able to assume the weight of your choice, right, and say,
Right.
okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I have to figure out the best way to do it. Right. This is not some plan B, let's say. It's not some. I'm not a half a chassid because of what I'm doing, and the danger of that to me also, of thinking of like you're half a chassid. It's not just like, oh, you're gonna feel you're gonna lose a little bit of morale. Once you go down that road, if I'm already half a chassid, so then why am I even bothering with any of it?
Exactly.
Right? It's
Right.
very easy, and I can speak this from my own experience.
Right.
It's very easy to okay, if I'm not a shliach anymore, and I don't have that, and like I'm subpar to what I expected to be, so let me just throw it all out. There's no point.
Right.
Right? That's a danger, right? That's a danger of it, and it's also wrong. It's flat out wrong.
Right.
There are choices that people make. Those choices are informed by their realities, right? And when it's possible, like you're saying, when you're 24 and you're thinking about life, maybe it's not your responsibility to think of every possibility that comes out 12 years, because nobody knows what's going to happen in 12 years from now, right? No, and you start a business, you don't know you're going to be successful.
Right.
You don't know anything, so you do what is at hand, you with the best information available.
Right.
But when you're 36 or whatever, however old you were, and you're choosing now, and you have to choose a new path, or a new path, and you choose a path that you choose, there's value to that choice as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's not falling off the path; it's a different path.
Yeah, but I would like to add that I think it's healthy for every young person to consider shlichus.
Yeah.
If you go back on the Lubavitch ideology, going from the beginning, is Hasidim were ready to be bottled to the Rebbe,
Right.
and they'll do Chabad Chassid was someone who's willing to do something beyond normal because because that's his kashrus to the Rebbe.
Right.
And if you go through the times of communism, we were the majority of the few hundred Jews that stay religious in Russia out of a few million Jews were Chabad Hasidim.
Right.
So throughout history, there was a core of Hasidim. Not all of them. There was a core of Hasidim that were willing to really do what's crazy and sacrifice themselves and their family for the larger cause.
Right.
And I think the Chabad ideology, does demand that if the Rebbe wants shlichus that we take it in consideration. The lifestyle that we lived as Hasidim all these years, should we actually go on shlichus? I think every person has to make that decision for themselves. You could be 100% a Hasid doing business or doing anything else that you feel is the right thing for you. I think the ultimate decision is really, I think the Rebbe explains it in the Sikha, that every person has their mission in the world.
Right.
And your mission is really based on certain facts about your life, your talents, the education you got, the place you are, right? So a person has to be practical,
Right.
If you're really good at computers, it's very possible that God wants you to actually do computers.
Right.
There's a reason he gave you that talent. And the Rebbe pointed this out many times, Hasidus points this out, and it makes sense.
Right.
But I like the institution of shlichus. I would like this generation. I would like to see it not be in either extreme.
Right.
Like I would like, I find sometimes there's some young people that don't even give a second thought to it.
Right.
Think about it for a moment. And then I find some people that they feel like obligated to go. also think about that for a moment. If you're not going to enjoy it, if you're not going to be good at it for whatever reason, if it's not going to work out with your wife, children, and other factors, that's a great ideology. But not everyone has to be a Rosh Hashiva. Not everyone has to be a shliach.
Right.
Rosh, you'll do what you have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Look,
Yeah.
I am not in any way. There's always a danger when you critique something. It sounds like you're because you're only talking about like you're pushing back at something, and so you're not really not explaining the pro. So I'm glad you did that.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think there's tremendous beauty to shlichus. There's tremendous depth to it. There's something very, very, very special about it. Right. And I don't say that just to be. I believe that. I believe that. I believe that. And even in your story, I feel that the 12 years that you were there, and the way you look back at it today, even though there are complications looking back at it, you still feel that way, and that's what I feel from you, right? So I definitely resonate to that. To me, in a way, when you think of it as a choice and not as a status quo,
100%,
and it only amplifies, it only makes it more beautiful, right? Because this is a beautiful you own it.
Yeah.
You own it. You own it, and you are fulfilling what you feel you should be fulfilling. Right. And
you're saying it in very clear words.
Yeah. So
and it should definitely be a choice. It should. I think Yon Shlichim today, I hope they're looking at it as a choice, and that, like the way you say it, that they own it because they feel this is what they want to do, this is what they're good at, this is what their life mission is,
Right, and the flip side of that is that when you choose something else, you choose that also with the full weight of it. It's not just a negation of something else. It's not just a negation of shlichus, right? You're choosing that way of life, and you're finding the potential in that too. I mean, Chassidus talks about hashgacha pratis, right? That every single thing in the world is not just a secondary thing for something else, but that itself is watched over by the Eibishter, right? That's the whole one of the main arguments of Chassidus, that you don't have to explain the leaf falling down for something else, but the leaf itself falling down is for the leaf, right? Right, and the breeze is not so that you should have. No, the breeze is for the breeze. Everything, even if you didn't have a special connection to hashgacha pratis, but hashgacha pratis is on everything in the world, right?
Correct.
So why does that end by Lubavitchers, right? There is a point in your life. There's a purpose to your life. There is a vision for your life that's godly and divine, in however you choose to live your life.
Yeah.
Right? Why did we cut it off and say, if you're on shlichus, yes, and if you're not on shlichus, maybe. There's a purpose, and a purpose that goes all the way up to the highest level, no matter how you live your life. And if someone listening to this says, oh, so you're negating shlichus, I would say that that's a misreading of what shlichus is. A shlichus an institution of shlichus that cannot tolerate choice and cannot, becomes weakened by people choosing to opt in or to choose something else is an institution. It's a very weak institution. And it's not a vibrant. It's not an institution that will last. Because what keeps something running is people choosing and adding to it, not people following along with it because they feel there's no other option. So
that's a part of being a chassid, by the way.
Is what?
One of the uniqueness of Chassidus Chabad is that we use our brains, we ask questions, we choose.
Right.
We're each different. We don't rely on the Rebbe to take us to save us for anything.
Right.
It's our work.
Right.
So I agree with you. 100%.
All right. So
thank you so much. It was very nice.
It's a very, 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 very inspiring conversation for me. It was very, very nice to meet you in person. Yesterday, or the past 2 days. I know you're not supposed to advertise life insurance and push it on people, but anybody looking for a life insurance agent, definitely recommend Rabbi Yossi Morozov here.
Thank you so much.
Hashem should bless you that you become the biggest donor of Ulyanovsk, was it?
Ulyanovsk.
Ulyanovsk. All right.
Thank you so much.
music for this podcast comes from the album Repentance Doors by Oren Sor and Nadav Vachar and is used with their permission.